Go ahead.
So here we are back in Santa Clara, 3 months after we returned from Baltimore, where we were living for the month of August, working with Innovation Works Baltimore. We were working on some action research for them, which involved a twofold project. On one end, we were doing research in the field to help them with their marketing and communication strategies, and while doing so, we were filming, and we were filming all of our interviews and conversations with Innovation Works staff, community members, mentors, in order to film a short documentary which outlines Innovation Works' impact and mission in Baltimore and their collaborative work with the various social entrepreneurs that they support.
And I can start off by just talking about Baltimore a little bit because I'm from there. So it was really exciting for me to be able to go home and also like bring people from school to Baltimore, and like I had expectations of what it was, but then meeting the Innovation Works team and just seeing all of the different work between just that internal team and the entrepreneurs throughout the city really gave me like a new look at my city, which was a really interesting like kind of learning going back home.
I think that like in the research that we did prior to going to Baltimore, we heard a lot about the innovative the folks that are creating solutions for their communities, and also just hearing like small descriptions of the social entrepreneurs that make IW, meeting some of them, and even the employees that always mentioned the Baltimore Grit and the love for Baltimore that people have. And I think that we really saw that come through when we were like shooting B-roll, or we were going out on to the park with social entrepreneurs. It really came through, and that was like truly special for me.
Yeah, I agree. Growing up on the East Coast, I'd never been to Baltimore. I'd always heard about it, but it was always kind of just tossed in there with DC, but no one really talks about Baltimore. No one talks about how it was the city where redlining was created and how it has such a deep history of segregation and oppression. And it's been overlooked, and we got this opportunity to go into Baltimore and look at it through the lens of a camera and through our own eyes. And that was an extremely eye-opening experience for me. And yeah, I think we all sort of fell in love with Baltimore. Nat re-fell in love with Baltimore, but Ángel and I got to build our own relationships with the city. Not to mention all living together completely added to that. 3 strangers tossed in a house. I think we learned a lot about teamwork and cooking. But yeah, no, so we had a great time, and I think one of the things we found most of all was that at Innovation Works, there are many hands working, and whether that's from the staff, from the founder, from the CEO, from the team of 9 employees who are working relentlessly day in and day out, because they are so passionate about Innovation Works' mission and the social entrepreneurs that they are working with. And then there's the social entrepreneurs who are just these amazing stories of their own. People who are from their own communities have the best solutions for the problems that their communities are facing. And in Baltimore, where it's just these extreme wealth divides between neighborhoods, that disinvestment, just being able to see how these entrepreneurs in the face of challenge are just creating these incredibly innovative solutions.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see. Jay talked about this a lot, but I feel like it was pretty consistent, at least in the mindset of everybody there, and really looking at the world with an opportunity mindset was something that was just really like inspiring to me in how people were able to look around and at like issues around them and not get that kind of like stuck feeling, but really just like wanting to move forward and like, I know how we can get through this, and I know how we can like solve this problem, and like we can make a better world.
Yeah, and it was like awesome that they received us with open arms. This community receives strangers with open arms, right? College kids from Santa Clara, California, like what are they doing in Baltimore? But it was awesome that they received us with open arms, and we got to see their world and their life, and just like community just really shine through. You know, I've always had my own image of community back home, but I think that seeing the community in Baltimore was just like, whoa, like everyone's working towards improving the city. Everyone wants to see the city of Baltimore back on top, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned that feeling of being outsiders, and I think we all really struggled with that during this process. And going back into editing was a terrifying moment, because then we were not only outsiders there, we were outsiders here looking back on this footage. And it was just this constant dialogue between the three of us, was how are we going to be a canvas to tell other people's stories ethically and without bias. And you know, that's a really challenging thing to do, and art inherently has that bias and that perspective in it. So I think just editing has been such an incredible process, and filming too just forced us to have these difficult dialogues where we were able to be honest with each other, with the community members we were meeting with, and it was just a real experience of checking us on our privilege, and also checking us on how we can then create this collaborative work in a way that's going to uplift many voices.
Talking about, like, you know, Nat, you mentioned, I think you have this, you know, analogy or metaphor of like, we're kind of the stick for the tomato vine to grow, right? Like, we're the canvas for these folks. And so if like you could talk a little bit more about just like following the story, and just, we're not telling the story for them, they're telling the story.
Yeah, I mean, Hannah mentioned the editing process, and that's like a really important aspect of following the story, and like thinking about what it is that you just witnessed for a month, because you can try to live in something well filming it, but ultimately there's like a separation that comes with that. And following the story while filming helped to bring us through to the different aspects of the story that really would bring out the ultimate whole story of Innovation Works in the editing room. I remember one of my favorite days in general was when we went to Pigtown and met with Chester. And Chester we did a lot of preliminary interviews. We talked to many of the entrepreneurs we ended up interviewing beforehand, but Chester was somebody that we didn't hear about until we were in Baltimore. But then he came up, I think, in like 2 to 4 different interviews with employees. So we ended up getting in contact with him and went to his office in Lifting Labels, and he's become one of the like centerpieces of the documentary. And I think that just like shows that wide connection that Innovation Works has. And then like further in the editing room, once we were really trying to narrow down that story and how to tell all of this amazing work in 15 minutes, it really did come down to that research and preliminary stuff that we put in, because then we had an understanding of what we wanted Innovation Works to be perceived as for ourselves, and then going there and really living with them, we were able to just take in everything that we could, and then go home or come back to Santa Clara and try to put that all together. And obviously it's very collaborative, sending drafts back and forth, and we've had a lot of changes. But that's part of the whole fun.
Yeah, I think what you're saying about Chester really showed how during our interviews, everything always came back to the entrepreneurs. All of the staff always talking about the entrepreneurs. The mentors always talking about the entrepreneurs. So when it came to, well, who's going to be the center story of the documentary, it was the entrepreneurs. And that was our consensus too. So it was definitely this feeling that we started to see how the entrepreneurs were the heart of the entire IW network, and everyone else just sort of beat around them. And that really brought us to how we were going to shape our strategic communication recommendations for the organization as well, once we realized that sort of key fact that all the entrepreneurs were at the center. So you have to focus communication to the entrepreneurs, and then everything else will follow with all of the other stakeholders. I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more about that for how we've then structured our strategic communication report.
Yeah, no, I mean, we were honestly having a difficult time, but, you know, joining Nat in the editing room and, you know, centering entrepreneurs, like, it was just, I don't know, it was super important. It was super important because, like, it brings in, you know, other stakeholders, it brings in mentors, it brings in investors. And so just like laying out the SCP around that with the data that we collected from the Qualtrics is just like, you know, I think when we turned it into IW, it's like, hey, the answer is the entrepreneurs. Like, here's all the data, here's who makes up IW, you know, you have to cater around these folks.
Yeah.
And that's the answer to it.
Yeah, after we conducted the survey to all of this newsletter audiences, the entrepreneurs were the ones who responded the most.
Yeah.
And I think that the strategic communication report, we had initially planned all these different sections, and then it really came back to, okay, if your entrepreneurs are at the center, the mission is about how are we going to support entrepreneurs and how are we going to build sustainable neighborhood economies in Baltimore. And if you focus on the mission and you focus on social entrepreneurs, the rest is going to fall into place. And so that's really what focused our direction with the report, and then having the film piece be a sort of working element of that strategic communication plan, because we have the 17-minute documentary as well as the short 3-minute trailer, and those two videos combined can really bring in any person outside of the IW network and show them, hey, this is Innovation Works. Come work with us. Like, we want to work with you. This is us. And giving them those pieces of cohesive messaging to help them tell their story was an incredibly empowering experience.
Yeah, so it was great working on these projects. You know, I think for me, it just showed me that, you know, I care very much about community-centered work. And for me, I mean, I don't know what lies in the future, but I hope that, you know, wherever I go, it's community-centered and that I'm able to hear folks out and, you know, help design solutions that will uplift the whole community together. And I think was something that IW taught me and Baltimore taught me in general. So it's been helpful for you all.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely learned a lot in this process, in how much time documentary takes, how much like emotional commitment a documentary takes, and I like truly did love it. It really, I mean, I've said this to you guys a number of times now, but like, it really made me realize there's nothing I can write that's more interesting than the real world right now. Like, people actually making change in the world around us is something that I really want my filmmaking to uplift, and that's like, that definitely changed my direction, and I'm really grateful for Innovation Works for allowing this opportunity.
Yeah, I feel similarly. This experience allowed me to exercise both the creative part of my brain working in art and working in film, but I also got to work on my more critical and analytical side, working on the communication plan, and it really showed me that I can have both wherever I go, and while doing so, still be having social impact and connection to community. And for me, that was just a very exciting thing, not to mention I made 2 new friends. Woo!
All right, well, we all need to visit Baltimore again.
Yeah. Get some Eki Ben.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Eki Ben.